Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. Link in the description. You get access to 10 different channels, but you got to pay. I mean, that's part of this. $2.99 per month. You can cancel at any time. Those 10 channels include draft and transaction channels. So if you just want to talk about those things, you can do that. This is basically like Twitter segmented, except everything that's good on Twitter, we put there anyway, and you don't have to deal with the other BS. So that's why we mention Off the Floor. Link right here in the description. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down your $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You can play across the sports spectrum. All the sports, combined players from different sports, different teams, up to 6 players, legal in the state of Florida. So check it out. It's prizepicks.com. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Mercy. Luxurious. Heat Nation. Yeah. Mercy and Lago. Down to Biscayne.
Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frogs.
Down to Biscayne.
Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. Inspire have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. And Greg Sylvander, you can follow him at Greg Sylvander. We'll be continuing to record episodes throughout the playoffs and, of course, before the draft. And then, of course, free agency, trades. We got plenty of stuff we'll talk about. We're just going to spread it out a little bit. All right, we are going to get into a story that was written today. And I want to start here because this is always treacherous territory for me. All right, I was a journalist at one time. I don't know what happened. I went to Columbia Journalism School.
Why do you say was?
I learned all of the rules. Okay. Times they used to, Columbia Journalism School, when I graduated in 95, they used to just give you a desk at the New York Times. Now I don't even know if the New York Times exists. Everything has changed, and journalism is not the same as it was. And I don't even know what I am anymore. We have termed this fanalist, which actually I have trademarked with a Y in it. And well, there's a long story there, but basically it's sort of this mix, right? Like, so that's a lot of what our network is. Some have come a little closer to my side, and I feel like over time I may have come a little bit closer to their side, although I don't like to acknowledge that. I'm saying that because I don't like to criticize other quote unquote journalists. It's just very hard to figure out what a journalist is these days and is not. And without getting too specific, there are certain journalists that don't have the best track record on reporting, and I try to steer it away. Doesn't mean they're bad people. Doesn't mean they don't get some stories right, but then there's a lot of wrong that kind of gets washed under the rug, and I think that's where we're at today. So I'm not even going to mention the reporter's name because I don't want to do that, and I don't want to be treated here like I'm water carrying for the organization. I'm just trying to be as objective as I can be. Nobody reached out to me about this. There was an article that came out that has been aggregated, which is the other level to this, because it's not just that we don't know what a journalist is anymore. Sometimes journalist reports are then aggregated in snippets. It's happened to me many times, and I've complained about it, that don't totally even represent what the article of the journalist says or what the journalist might have said on a podcast or anywhere else, because it's just a snippet without context. And then that gets amplified. And so it's so far away, we've got a telephone game. And that's kind of what feels like it happened today, because now all of a sudden Giannis doesn't want to play for Pat Riley. That's essentially the headline that came out of an article that was written, that if you actually read the article, it does kind of say that, but it quotes Xavier McDaniel from the 90s. And I don't know why the reporter just couldn't have talked to Kurt Rambis. Perhaps, I don't know, Anthony Bonner from the old Knicks. Like, who was not available that they couldn't have spoken to at that time? Norm Nixon, perhaps. as I read through this article that was the source of this information, that Giannis and other stars don't want to play for Pat Riley, which again is a conversation we should have, okay? But as I started to go through it, I'm like, he's not quoting anybody. He's not even citing anonymous sources throughout the league. He quoted Mario Chalmers on something that happened in the 2011 finals or something like that, and Mario wasn't even critical. He was talking about Spo. So as I go through this article, I'm like, okay, where is the evidence, A, that Giannis doesn't want to play for Pat Riley, which maybe he's heard, but I don't know. I mean, same reporter that said that Giannis wants to play for an East team like Brooklyn or Toronto. Do we really think Giannis is going to end up in Toronto? Okay, so well, you're looking at me a little crazy on that. Maybe I'll be proven wrong and you can clip it. But as I'm looking at this article, and I'll go to both of you guys on it. You both read it, okay? Without mentioning the reporter's name. Are you concerned now after reading this article that Giannis and other stars, just from the article itself, forget other stuff we might have heard or might believe or might perceive, which Alex may want to touch on some of this stuff. Greg, reading the article, does this lead you to believe that the Heat are doomed in terms of getting stars like Giannis?
It's just the most ridiculous notion. I'll dispel it in a couple of ways, but I also think that it's important to say that I understand why, like the way that the game goes today and people are jumping on the internet and reacting to a subset of an article. And to me, and I texted you guys this earlier today, this felt like a little bit of kind of like sound bites that lead to a hit piece. It sounds like the kind of stuff you'd hear when they would eventually try to run Riley out of town, right? But it's just not accurate that players don't want to play in Miami. Jimmy wanted to leave because they didn't want to pay him. Had they paid him, I think he'd stick around. Bam extended. Tyler Hero sat up there just a week ago and said he'd like to stay in Miami long term. I know that it's not good enough to just say that the players that are on the team that are all-stars say they want to be there. I have it on pretty good authority that there was a time Donovan Mitchell thought that it would be New York or maybe Miami. Those were kind of his top two options. There's another player. We know Kevin Durant's flirted with Miami. There's another player. Dame asked Miami and only Miami. There's another player. And this is the last thing I'll say before I go ranting any further. They're not coming to play for Pat Riley.
Right.
Eric. Why are we doing this? Like, they may not even see Pat for 6 weeks at a time.
No, they won't. No, to me, that's the single biggest point here is that, okay, it's enough for us to have to explain the way that they work now, which, by the way, Pat confirmed at his own presser that it's a collaborative, okay? He didn't say I'm in charge of everything. I make all the decisions. Nick Harrison has had final say since 2011. Let me repeat again. Nick Harrison has had final say since 2011. They've been in 5 finals since. Okay. Beyond that, we know that Andy has say. We know that Adam Simon has say. We know that Spo has say. We know that Mickey has say. We know that Zoe has say. Am I missing someone off the top of my head? If I am, I apologize. Okay. Are those the primaries? Okay. At one point, Shane had say. All right.
You said Adam Simon, right?
Yes, I said Adam. So again, this idea that, and Pat has say, so, you know, I'm looking at it and I'm saying like, okay, first thing, it's tough enough to explain, Alex, the structure of the organization, which is not Pat ruling from up high with an iron fist. Okay. He's basically the face of it because honestly, Nick doesn't want to be. Okay. And they haven't found another one. That's really what this is. Okay. And eventually it will probably be Spo. Okay. Because Shane didn't work out in that regard. And so eventually it's going to be Spo. And it doesn't mean Spo's going to give up the coaching title either, or the coaching gig either. It just means he's going to add an additional title. That's where I think this is probably going. But then beyond that, now we have to explain that Pat's not the coach. Like, I thought that was clear, Alex. I mean, the Heat have the longest tenured effing coach in the entire NBA right now. Like, did this reporter not get the news that Eric Spoelstra has been coaching this team since 2008, has won 2 championships with this team, has reached, what is it? 4 other finals, correct? Okay. And has been voted by his executives, by players as the top coach in the league. We can argue about his performance this year, but like, they are not the same organization, under Spo. I sat outside of Pat Riley practices and waited for 8 hours and ordered 3 pizzas. I've never done that with Eric Spoelstra, okay? He doesn't even get to the plane on time. Alex, is Eric Spoelstra coaching this team or is Pat Riley? Because I'm confused.
No, yeah, it's funny with some of like the stuff that you hear from certain players and certain guys who maybe didn't play for the team. It kind of seems like they're putting this reputation where like Spo is the coach, right? Like he's the guy who everybody calls the top coach, but yet somehow like Pat Riley is like the general out there, like commanding everybody in practices and holding them hostage for hours on end, right? Like that's I think that the culture stuff, the reputation kind of precedes itself and kind of led to this, even though it's not necessarily their doing, right? Like you've made it clear for years now that things are not how they were. Like so I defer to you when it comes to that stuff, because it's like you were there, like you saw what it was like, and you saw like the differences in styles, right, and management styles here. And I think there's obvious ones just from watching the games. But when it comes to that type of stuff, like it feels like you see Kevin Garnett talking about it, you see Jeff Teague talking about it, you see a lot of guys who kind of I feel like are hearing things from other people and then kind of creating their own narrative off of it. You know what I mean? And maybe they've heard things from other players who are like, yeah, they're really strict. And I think that's like a fair, like just from what I've seen of them, like very strict and very serious about their business is probably an accurate way of describing the Heat. But then it gets to a certain point where it's like, okay, it becomes an exaggeration. Like you mentioned earlier, like Riley is the figurehead. And, because of that, when you're the figurehead, you get the praise, and then you also are the one getting all the blame when things go wrong. And I said in our private chat here earlier, as a joke, but also it's funny that this is the year that he wanted to make it clear to everybody that it's a collective in the front office.
First time ever, right? We've never heard that before. Well, he has said it. He says we have
a
great team.
No, they have.
He said we have a great team. But here's the other part of this, okay? First thing, KG would have been a perfect Heat player. And
except he and UD don't get along too well.
No, but they would have worked. The players who don't like each other, it would have worked. But the thing is, he is also, unlike Pierce, he has expressed his admiration for the Heat organization in general. And even what KG quoted recently was the socks that they wear. Look, I don't even know if that applies anymore. Okay, the reality. Look, they let Jimmy Butler stay in his own hotel on the road. The problem is Jimmy took advantage of everything. Okay, so now it's like, okay, now you got this narrative that the Heat are too strict because they didn't placate Jimmy Butler. No, they did, actually. And it backfired. Okay? So this idea that nobody wants to play there, and KG's, and we're hearing about cookies and socks and all the rest of this crap. Look, I was in the locker room, okay, with the big three. I covered every game but 4. Playoffs,
so you probably spoke to LeBron the day that he had his cookies taken from him.
Probably, and he never mentioned his cookies. Okay, he mentioned a lot of other shit, but he never mentioned his cookies. I'll say we were. I always tell this story. Okay, so it's one of the ones that jumps out. We were in Los Angeles over the Christmas break time, over the Christmas time. Okay, and I remember going into the locker room, and Pat always made that trip because he goes home to Malibu, right? So we're in, and again, this is a different Pat at this time, a little more spry. Okay, he was around a little bit more, whatever. We're in the locker room, and I remember Joe Goodman and I are just sitting there like shooting the shit because he used to have actually time with the players pregame locker room. You don't really anymore. Okay, sometimes on the road, but not much. That's why I don't travel. So we're in the locker room before the game, and we're like, okay, we're going to slow approach some of the guys. Okay, I knew everybody on that team by then. We start to get a little closer to reality. He says, "Get the fuck away from us." I said, "Why?" And it's because him and Rio and Amara Chalmers and LeBron were so angry because Pat had told them they couldn't go to Vegas in the break. Okay, so they didn't want to deal with us because they knew what they were going to say some shit. But like, obviously, I found out later. Okay, what the issue was. Okay, yes, there are certain things. Okay, that they do not allow. All right, like the Bulls, like when Rodman would disappear for 20 days or whatever. Like they don't allow certain things. But again, this idea, that Pat's coaching the team, he's not. Okay. Second, that Spo runs things like Pat. He doesn't. Okay. The practices are shorter. There's more individualized work. There's a lot of optional work. Okay. They don't call certain things practices anymore because they don't want to deal with the media. And when you call it a practice, then you have to provide availability. But like they're there, but a lot of them are working on their own. Okay, that's
That's so funny. I didn't even realize that's why they did that. That is.
Oh no, that is why they do.
I can't even be mad at them for that.
No, they do. They don't want to deal with us. So okay, fine. Like I get it. I've been around the organization long enough. You ultimately get the players that you need. So like, stop complaining about it. But like, he just runs a ship the way he runs it. It's not that there isn't structure under Spo, but like the draconian thing with Pat. And I know this for a fact. Okay, a few years ago, there was a players' association meeting. Okay, or the labor negotiations, and the players wanted limits on 2-a-days. Okay, in practices, right? And the players were bitching about it. All right, they were complaining about like certain old school coaches, and yes, Pat was one of them. Old school coaches. Again, this goes way back. Pat hasn't coached since the glorious season of 2007, 2008. All right, they were openly complaining about it. All right, but he wasn't the most disliked. Okay, there. Okay, even at that point. All right, and people understood what it was to play for Pat. And one of the people that this writer cites in the article is Gary Payton, who desperately wanted to play for Pat. Okay, yeah. Didn't the first time around, but then as he talked about at the press conference, he literally said that they came together at a table in Vegas. Okay, so it's just out of this, it becomes Giannis doesn't want to play in Miami because nobody wants to play in Miami. The beaches have not changed. The no state tax has not changed. The women have not changed. None of the things that actually matter to the players have changed. Okay,
the check's still cash. The check's still cash.
The check's still cash. The organization has won championships. Dame wanted to come. As you mentioned, Donovan Mitchell wanted to come. His issue, and I stand by my reporting on this as you do, was Jimmy. Okay? It wasn't the organization. It wasn't playing with Bam. All right? And then there are other players who have wanted to come. They just haven't been able to get it done. So that's where I'm at with this. And you can be critical of them for not getting it done. But this idea that if they just move Pat to the side, do you think the organization that these players don't know that Erik Spoelstra is essentially running things on a day-to-day now? How often does Pat talk to the press? Once. That's why we do 55 podcasts on it. Erik talks every day. Erik is the face of the organization during the season. Erik does USA Basketball. Erik is beloved, okay, by USA Basketball. Beloved, okay, by the players. You've never heard a bad thing come out about Erik from anybody who's associated with that program ever. And he's probably going to end up being the head coach of the whole thing. So, I mean, moving Pat aside and putting Spo in charge, I mean, to me, that feels like window dressing at this point. Like it's not going to change the way that they operate, right?
There's a segment of fans right now in this moment, and this is, we talk about could fans stomach a rebuild. This was just a rough season. And trust me, as someone who covered it and talked a lot about it all throughout the year, it was a rough season. But there's so many examples of players that have wanted to get to Miami. And I mean, I think at this current moment, you think about Spoelstra and he's with Bam at the Olympics. Why do y'all think Kevin Durant has signaled Miami before? Do you think that it's because of like the way that, and respect to Andy Ellisberg and his ability to maneuver the cap? I don't think players necessarily choose destinations because of teams' ability to do cap gymnastics, or maybe necessarily because they are good at scouting out and developing talent. Sometimes there's just destinations. And I feel like Miami is still that. And I just don't think we can discount that. It's just they haven't been able to get it done, to your point. No. Like that's the bigger thing. I think if anyone wants to get upset about something, it's that they haven't been able to close the deal on one of these players, but they've had part of the frustration is that we know players wanted to be here and they didn't get here.
Right. The issue has been the changes in the CBA and also some circumstances, and also maybe at times, and I'll acknowledge this, the unwillingness to kind of go away from their stated value. Okay. To collect the assets that are needed to make the kind of trades that need to be made in the current NBA. I'll give you all that. Okay. But again, this idea that they don't want to come to Miami. I mean, again, it's been rated, first thing, they're top 10 in salary. Okay. They were again this year. every one of those polls puts them in the top 5 in terms of organizations to play for. So I just think this is a narrative based on some players, Arenas, Teague, you mentioned, Alex, who never got a chance to play in Miami. Okay. Don't really understand how it works on the inside. I'm not saying everything is perfect. I used to criticize Pat's rules all the time. I used to say during the 90s, he was driving them too damn hard in the regular season, and they were not going to have another level to go to in the postseason. And you know what? I was right about that. They kept falling flat in the first round against the Knicks, okay, who had loosened things up after Pat left under Jeff Van Gundy. Okay, and they had more in the tank in those first-round series. But on the other side of this, I want to get both of your guys' final thoughts on this with the modern player, okay? Because, again, I'm old man and I can speak to all this stuff, although I would not have quoted Xavier McDaniel for this story. Last time I saw Xavier McDaniel was in a scene in the movie Singles. And if anybody knows that scene, just don't comment. Anyway, let's go to Cousins Moving.
And now it's time for Who's on the Move, sponsored by our friends over at Cousins USA Moving and Storage, family owned and operated since 1996. They can service both residential and commercial moves, whether you're going across town, across the state, across country, and even across the globe. They have a 15,000 square foot private warehouse in Lauderhill, Broward County. The number one priority for Cousins Moving is transparency and being honest with their customers. They have a very low turnover, with most of their movers working for them for over 10 years. So find them online at Cousins Moving on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or visit the website at www.cousinsusa.com/5RSN. They've got an exclusive offer through 5RSN. You get 5 free wardrobe boxes with your next move, so there's no need to pack your clothes away in suitcases. Just mention 5 reasons. And now, who's on the move?
All right, well, hopefully someone's on the move to Miami this offseason. I don't know if it's going to be Giannis. I mean, I first thing, we keep hearing that Giannis wants to play for a team with no state tax. Okay, now we're talking about Brooklyn.
I've heard he wants to stay east too. So
well, that makes more, but that makes more sense. I don't know, but I'm saying that makes more sense, and to me, that is the pitch that I would be making to any star. Everybody's gone west, and now Embiid's hurt, Tatum's hurt, Lillard's hurt. Like literally, you could put together arguably 3 or 4 all-NBA teams from the West, okay, before you get to like more than 3 players from the East. I mean, it's really
Jalen Brunson, the best current player in the Eastern Conference right now.
Halliburton, Brunson, Cade Cunningham, Paolo. I mean, they're good, really good players, but like, this is not Jokic and Shea and what's out west. I mean, it's not. This is the most tilted I've ever seen it. And with the injuries now, with the Tatum injury, with the Embiid injury, etc. So, I mean, I don't know who's the last great player to come east. Dame, and now he's out for the season. So, if I'm pitching something, I know with different trade and free agency, but I'm saying if you're KD and you're looking at the landscape in the East, you'll start in the All-Star game in the East. Okay, if they decide to go with that format, and you're right. I mean, you got a chance to be the best player in the East if you're healthy. All right, I'll let Greg go, and then I'm going to let Alex close today. Do the Miami Heat need to change, Greg?
I mean, I think that they should continue to always be evaluating and evolving where necessary. So I don't want to just blanket it by saying, no, they don't need to change. I think that their standards and the things that have set them apart from other organizations, they're not going to veer away from that stuff because they've had success. Like I had someone message me recently and was talking about like the fact that Dallas got that pick and that Cooper Flag went there, and they were like, we almost had our moment of getting Cooper Flag. And I had to like remind him, like, we've had so many moments in Miami. Like, you can't just take one season and think that things are going in a completely bad direction. I know that it's been some frustrating times, but there were good times in the Jimmy Butler build. Now they transition to a new build. I'll just say this. I think society in general always arrives at a place collectively, and it's probably some kind of subconscious thing that everybody starts doing. They turn on people as they age. And that's where we're at with Pat. I hate to say that, but I think that overall you're seeing a younger and younger demographic, and they don't identify with Pat's success stories. When they hear it from you or I, Ethan, it's like we're old people telling stories. And so there's a degree of people that just don't get it with a guy like that. And
Happened to Shula too, by the way.
It's unfortunate, but I don't think it's a Pat Riley thing. I think it's a society thing. And I just think that ultimately people start to poke holes in anybody as they age. And it's unfortunate. But they do say Father Time is undefeated. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of rooted in that to some degree.
Yeah, I feel it from the network. And as I age, less and less respect for my opinion or my projections. Alex, finish us up.
Oh boy, I don't know about this decision putting me here to close, but look, I completely understand what Leif is talking about here. I get it, and I think it goes back to what we've been saying about him being the figurehead. You know, he's always been the godfather and all of that stuff. And even though we know that it's not him, like he's not this guy making unilateral decisions. And like people like to make the comparisons, like, oh, we've been complaining about 80-year-olds and running for president and 80-year-olds as president, but it's like, God, like this guy is not necessarily running the country. You know what I mean? Like he's in a group of people making basketball decisions, but I do understand the frustration.
Either
like
somebody else. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue.
I just think it comes to like it becomes a situation where he becomes the guy to blame, and you need to find something to point at, to where like obviously changes need to be made when it comes to the roster. And I think really when it comes to what I think they need to change is some of the ways that they go about doing that stuff. And of course, like Leif mentioned, there's been so many moments, I think the perspective there was good to remind people. It's like, yeah, like what they were supposed to know, that like the 1.8% chance was gonna land them the number one pick, as opposed to going with, the unprotected pick route. You know what? I can't blame them. I can't blame them for going with the safer route. Like it was the more responsible decision at the time, as opposed to going gambling with less than 2%. You know what I mean? Like, so in things like that, like I think it becomes like Pat Riley is the guy to point at, and has become the source of everybody's frustration. That is where everybody puts their frustration to. The good thing for him is that it doesn't really matter either way. His job security is good. Like he's going to be fine. He's going to be there as long as he wants to be. But other than that, like they've got to be, I think, a little bit more creative with the way that they do some of the roster building stuff. I think some of the done in the past is, with like who they sign and who they let walk. Of course, there's no way of knowing what's going to happen, right? Like you do the best you can, but I just feel like there's some inconsistencies there. Like they went through the whole thing with Tyler Johnson and James Johnson and all those contracts they signed in 16 and 17. And then when they were contending, were not willing to re-sign guys who were helping them at the time, like Caleb, or at least were willing to re-sign them up to a point. Right, like Caleb. I mean, Gabe and Max, and then you had Caleb. So they kind of went like the opposite way of what they did with Gabe and Max. Were like, okay, we're gonna pay this guy right here, and they almost shot themselves in the foot, frankly, with that contract. Like, I just think there's been some inconsistencies with some of their principles, and I think the timing of it there was a little bit weird, and just in general, like I think they need to be a little bit more willing to, like in years where things are not going great. Like you don't always have to try to be a contender when it's clear you're not one, right? And I think that's going to be a theme this summer, where it's like completely understand you going after Giannis, understand you wanting to, pick a direction and go with KD. Like when that fails, what's the direction then? Because like me and Leif were talking about it before the show, they're in this weird apron situation. Yeah. It's like if they don't get that star, are they going to let Davion walk? Are they going to waive Duncan before that date when his contract becomes fully guaranteed? Like what are they doing here? I think the decisions they've made in the past in general have kind of put them in this place where, yeah, stars have been willing to come here, no doubt about it, but they've been kind of handcuffed because of those decisions, So I think they've got to reevaluate kind of how they got here a little bit.
No, I'm with you on that. I'll say one thing as I close, okay? For all the criticisms of a Riley organization, some of which have become valid in recent years because the success has not been there in the regular season, at least. They're not supposed to be a play-in organization, particularly not a 10 seed. And I understand the need at times to pivot, to try to accumulate assets and draft picks and go a different direction and maybe choose a different direction quicker. With that said, there ain't a star in the effing league, okay, that is going to be against an organization that's trying to win. Not one, okay? F them picks. That's what the stars are going to say. They don't care about the damn picks. They care about, are you going to put me in a position to get in the spotlight so I can make the most money possible? I mean, let's just be honest here. So I can get the endorsements so people know my name, so I'm the biggest celebrity possible. Can this organization do that? And do they want to do that? Or are they content just accumulating picks and being Sacramento for 15 years? Like, to me, that is if you're going to make a case for their philosophy of going for it, it is because that's what stars want to see. Because winning does matter to a lot of them. It does not mean the Heat will always execute it. It does not. They did not this past year. This last year was effing miserable. But, okay, they still tried to push through and win. And I think ultimately, and this is where I do not think it will change with Spo, because I think he's as much this way as Pat, if not more, okay? He ain't going to play for the damn lottery. He's just not. It's a waste of his time, okay? Try to develop players, but their idea is to push forward. We can disagree with it, okay? There are times that I have disagreed with it. But the idea, this prism that people have, that stars don't want the Pat Riley way, no, that part of it they do want. They do want. And I've talked to a lot of them over the years, okay? LeBron came to Miami in part because he thought they could win. That was the whole deal. It was just as a legacy play, okay? He needed to win championships. He knew that they could help him get there, okay? Jimmy's never gotten as far anywhere else as he got in Miami. LeBron's never gotten, well, he has. I want to say that. He's never gotten as far, but he's won 2 championships. Not back-to-back, and he's won 2 championships in Miami, and he's been, how many other years is this now? 16, 17? He's got 2 total everywhere else. All right? So, again, I'm not saying their way is perfect. I'm not saying it doesn't require modification. Please don't. Okay, water,
it's that perception that they're going to be followed around when they come to Miami, that they've got Heat people on them everywhere they go.
Shit, I got Heat people on. I got our people on you guys, okay? And you're still with me.
What?
All right, Alex. Yeah, and so where you were last night. Alex, Greg, appreciate it. We'll have Brady on soon. I know where Brady is at all times. I got a little Brady meter. Thanks to our sponsors, cousinsusa.com/5RSN. Prize Picks. Use the code FIV.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.